I got a Swiss Army knife.
Let's get it done.
And she's almost a doctor.
And
Yeah,
she-
I'm
I have a mole. Can you?
6 o'clock, folks.
And what's
In other
that?
words,
What
in
is
other
that
words,
supposed to
get to work.
Okay, then. Let's get into my 400-page packet.
That's it. There we go.
Okay, this is Monday, December 20th. This is a study session somewhere on my agenda, I'm sure. We hope to accomplish a couple things this evening. One is to kind of wrap up our land development code conversation with Kirsten, and then also take a quick look at our City of Ellensburg legislative priorities. I would note that we also have a regular council meeting in an hour, more or less. So with that, why don't we just start? Again, I'll remind folks, if anybody is tuning in, we're not taking any public testimony during this part of the conversation. This is really a study session for council and have interaction with Kirsten as Director of Community Development and staff. Thank you.
All right, well, you pretty much welcomed me, but I'll state for the record, Kirsten Sackett, Community Development Director. And yes, this is a follow-up discussion on proposed changes to the zoning code and our land use charts and even the zoning maps. And just as a reminder, we've looked at this item before council on a few different meetings, September 20th, October 11th, and October 18th. And hopefully tonight will be just kind of the last run through before we move it forward through all the processes it needs to go through. But as a quick reminder, what we discussed previously is the reason we're presenting this ordinance is that we're looking to align our development code more closely with the goals, specifically the housing goals of the comprehensive plan, which focus on encouraging a variety of housing types and meeting the housing needs of all economic segments of the community. Staff also has noted over time that sometimes we get proposals within the city that make sense for development, but the zoning code doesn't allow for it just because of the changing nature of how the city has grown. I did give you information about the fact that the Planning Commission held 12 different work sessions themselves over time to look at this. There was a few meetings with the public to present this information. And we've come up with this ordinance that's in your packet. It's 53 pages long. You've seen it before, but there's changes this time compared to what you saw before. So we've already discussed this, but we are proposing to add 2 new mixed-use zoning districts, a regional scale mixed use and a neighborhood scale mixed use. We're looking to eliminate the commercial tourist zone and just simply consolidate it with the commercial highway. We'd amend the zoning map in several areas, revise some of the permitted uses within the land use charts, and also make some revisions to the setback and density tables. Now, at the conclusion of the last time we met, there was some discussion that came up regarding the height of buildings within the commercial or central commercial zoning district. And this was taken to the Landmarks and Design Commission. And I did want to share. Let's see. I can find it again. I wanted to share the map. I did not include it in your packet, but let's see, that's. Okay, is that showing up correctly on Zoom? Okay, good. All right, so this shows the boundaries of the central commercial zone. So this dark blue is the CC zone. And the question was whether or not we wanted the height restrictions to change within the national or local landmarks registers. And so when we went to the Landmarks and Design Commission, what they came back with was that they were okay with the idea of increasing the height limit in the CC zone. It's currently 45 feet. Okay with the idea of upping it to 60 feet with the exception of being within the local landmarks district. And so that's the one that's outlined in red. It's a little bit larger than the one in the hashed black. That's the national register. So they wanted the larger district, the local one, and to keep that at 45 feet. And then we had talked previously about maybe having like a distance from those boundaries to where you have a step back, but they thought, let's not go with that. Otherwise you basically eliminate the ability to do that within the entire zone, with the exception of if it's adjacent to a residential property, any of the four sides of a property border a residence, then it should be limited to 45 feet. So that is the recommendation that they have forwarded back to U.S. Council. And that is reflected on page 30 of the ordinance itself. And let's see if I can actually. Oh, sorry. I've got the comp plan stuff up too, so I'm going to stop share. And to the correct one. Okay, so this is page 30 of the ordinance. And what we had done, just a reminder, we have an area in the code that tells what the setback and intensity standards are. And we've created one where it's specifically for commercial, industrial, and public reserve. And so we've removed the CC and CC2 and put it into a new category specific for mixed uses. So when we go up to the one that we removed it from, the CC, the height limit had been 45 feet, and in CC2, it had been 70. So down here, echoing.
Sorry.
Okay. What we've done is we've changed it to both 60 feet. So the CC2 is actually going down from 70 to 60. CC has got the 60 foot with two caveats, and they're conditions 7 and 11, and those are in yellow down here. So it just states where the subject property shares any portion of a border with a residential zone, the maximum building height is 45 feet. And then also that the maximum building height in the downtown Ellensburg local landmark district is 45 feet. So capture that
Could
there.
you just go back to the map for a moment?
To the map?
Yeah, I just was having difficulty seeing the boundaries.
Yeah, it's just a matter of me getting back to the correct one.
Mike, can I ask you to do one other thing? Could you say what the top street is and the bottom?
Okay, so
On the red one.
yeah, so it's in between two streets. So this is 7th, and I'll zoom in a little bit more. So 7th and 6th. So it's like mid-block between those two. And then over here, we have mid-block between Ruby and Pine. And then to the western extent, it's mid-block between Water and Main. And then on the southern extent, it's between 3rd and 2nd mid-block.
And then just for reference, the Patricia Place apartments what were their height?
They were at the 45 feet. That's what they are right now. All three of them. Any other questions about that or concerns?
There's a typo on the number 11 on the page that you were on. a minute
Yeah,
ago.
I
Just
noticed
missed
that.
it.
I was
Okay,
going to
I won't-
change it, but it was
I won't worry about it. if you don't.
pointless in this version.
That's fine.
So the county courthouse, is that in green right there? Water and
Yes.
6th. Yeah, so that is not part of this, the 45-foot top.
That would be allowed 60, right?
Whatever the public reserve zone is, we'd have to go back to that.
Is that
Oh,
because
'cause it's not
CC?
CC.
Is that CC? Oh, that's public reserve.
It has. So when you look at on page 30, it states that in the PR zone, the maximum building height is, it says none, but it has a footnote that for areas within 100 feet of a residential zone, the maximum building height is 35 feet, except, and then it takes you to another exception, but the courthouse is what it is at this moment.
Well, it actually isn't, because it could be something different.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the.
Yeah,
genesis of
they're
the
talking
question.
about, I mean, the question is whether they
If they go
rebuild
60,
there.
if they go
or-
60 feet,
Or move it.
Mhm.
And the height would make a difference on their decision, I believe.
Yeah, they have to go up in order to keep the location.
If you want me to look that up, I need to pull up the actual code. It's not in this, it's not in a part we're changing in this ordinance.
I mean, I
I
don't,
think the point council's making is that we would want to see that particular that we would want to see flexibility there. Because if we adopted the 45-foot, we could be forcing
County to
the county to
relocate.
relocate
Yeah.
outside of the downtown as opposed to an option of
Okay.
renovating within the downtown core.
Thank you. Yeah, Mayor.
And so what we're looking at tonight is the 60-foot in both the dark blue CC and the light blue CC, and I'll see if that other exception.
Already provides
can
the
make it-
flexibility.
Yeah,
Sorry, Kirsten. I'm sorry, I
No.
didn't think about that before.
that's a good
You've
question.
brought this to us many times.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, that conversation's ongoing to develop.
Yeah.
But if it says none, then there's no height restriction at all, right?
And actually, yeah, unless it's within 100 feet of residential zone, and it does, I would have to measure it, but it probably isn't.
West, yeah. Well,
Depends on the depth of the lots and the street right away.
Yeah.
It could,
Again, we don't need to resolve this evening. I think it's simply to recognize the council's concern and desire to build flexibility into
Yeah.
that conversation. But that's, I think, all that's being said.
nope, we can look at that and make sure it is flexible. Okay. If there are not, are there any more questions on the map? No? Okay. I am going to go back to screen sharing and just point out a couple other things. I'm going to scroll back up a few pages just to point out the changes that we did make based on each of the conversations we had. So one was where we had talked about having automobile fueling come out of, it's currently within general service establishments. We're making its own thing. And then we had talked about having electric vehicle battery charging stations added in there. Just put it under automobiles so they're next to each other and just put the same, everywhere it's allowed and required to be allowed for the RCW.
So I had actually a question on that.
Okay.
As, I guess particularly in a multifamily situation, it would appear that we were not allowing a charging station. Is that accurate?
That's how it is right now. And that was just based on what the RCW said we needed to do. But if you would like us to put it in a,
Well, I'm putting what I'm, it's, I don't know what page.
Yeah. What page are?
this is page.
If 100.
Yeah.
33 of the packet, 22 of the.
Okay, thank you.
So when you're talking about the electric fueling or charging stations, you're talking about commercial, because anybody can put one in their house or apartment complex can install that. If it's commercial, this is what it's restricting.
Well, my,
So it's
Right.
do we
multifamily.
define that? I guess that, my
If it
my
was
point-
privately owned, there's no restrictions.
Charging station has a specific definition in the RCWs. That's why they're in these zones, because that's what's required by the RCW to be allowed.
Okay, but I just want to clarify to Rich's point that that's accurate. So somebody comes in, wants to build a 42 unit. Realistically, we're in 2030 and Toyota is now 75% EV. And running a charging unit from each of those apartment units would be cumbersome. I mean, there's a whole range of things that could be an issue. This would permit the developer to put a charging station in of, say, 4 or 5. That would still be permitted.
Again, we don't have to solve it tonight, but
Yeah.
I believe that would be the desire of,
Well, I think you want to build that flexibility in.
I think you'd want to specify that it's for the use of the tenants only.
Or they're not
For the
selling.
public, not for resale to public sort of thing.
Mhm.
Then that would, so it keeps it from being commercial. The other would be commercial.
So the definition from the RCW, the battery exchange station, is this the correct one to look at, Larry? Means a fully automated facility that will enable an electric vehicle with a swappable battery to enter a drive lane and exchange the depleted battery with a fully charged battery.
That's a different
Okay.
thing.
oh, sorry, battery charging station. An electrical component assembly or cluster of component assemblies designed specifically to charge batteries within electric vehicles which meet or exceed any standards, codes, regs set forth by the RCW. So. And then we have the rapid one, that's an industrial grade. So I guess.
Do you understand
where would-
our intent is if
Yeah.
it's to serve the people who live there.
Yeah,
We would like it to be very flexible. If
So-
it's commercial.
Yeah.
Available to everybody to drive up and get charged, then the restrictions are probably okay.
So all those residential zones you could allow, it could be a permitted with a footnote and just indicate in the footnote that it's non-commercial only, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's going to depend on where it all goes in terms of multifamily, right? I mean, because.
Well,
there's
I mean, you
additional
could
pressure.
argue, yeah, you
But
could-
I mean,
yeah, but single.
the one
family
that
is
jumped
okay.
out to me would be RM and RH.
Yeah.
Would be two where we'd want to assure that whoever was,
okay, yeah, no, that makes complete sense.
and maybe RL, I don't know, but those two. could be.
Okay. We will, I'll get with Terry and we'll draft some language to make that flexible. That makes perfect
Yeah,
sense.
we don't want to inadvertently criminalize the installation of charging stations in someone's garage, right, for their own vehicle, right?
Well,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, really what I'm going for is you've got an array of 10 first floor apartments and somebody living up on the third floor with an EV.
Yeah.
Somehow dropping cords out of their windows
Right.
to charge their vehicles.
It's kind of like we had the conversation 10 or 15 years ago about mandatory bicycle parking areas in multifamily development because there was demand, same kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Definitely. And I wanted to point out, I actually missed one. Already talked about this before, but we had added bed and breakfast to the 2 mixed use zones is permitted. So that was just mentioned in your staff report. We'll come back to this super scale use, promise. Then we had on page, no, it's not correct for you, but page 25 of the actual ordinance itself, there had been discussion on museums. So we added it back in as a conditional use permit to the residential zones and then the footnote that goes along with it, 12. It's just basically stating that museums within those residential zones are permissible within existing buildings. So it could be of any size, but if it's new construction, it would need to be 2,000 square feet or less to reflect the conversation we had last time. Okay, and then basically the last remaining item, it's not just one, but we never got into a discussion of the proposed changes within this larger use table. We talked about the residential, but the non-residential uses itself. So the planning commission, when they had their 11 work sessions, and they had another one later, 12, but during the 11, they actually sat down and looked at every single use in every single district, and they did propose some modifications. And those are incorporated into this. It's not just a matter of the fact that we're taking anything that was in the commercial tourist zone and putting it in the commercial highway zone. And I had misspoke last time. I had to reread those old minutes. They were really old to recall. That the planning commission had actually recommended that super scale over 60,000 square feet be added to the CH and the regional center mixed use. But those are not the only other uses they were looking at changing slightly. So anything that was underlined, they're adding bars and brew pubs, they're taking it out of restaurants and things like that. So I know that there was some desire to bring up the 60,000 square feet. And I know that.
So can you just, what was the character of the planning commission's discussions? Why did they
They just
decide to-
felt,
recommend this?
well, based on the minutes, there's not a whole lot to go off of, but just my recollection was that they felt after discussion that it could be appropriate in that zoning district, just looking at where the zoning districts were laid out. And I can pull up the zoning map as well as you have your discussion. When you look at it, the amount of commercial highway zone properties is not great, and they may not all fit that, but that's absolutely a discussion for you guys to have. And it's just forwarded as a recommendation. You guys are obviously the ultimate decision maker on that.
I had a question about that. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Okay.
no, go ahead.
I was thinking back about in your notes in the planning commission study sessions, 2018, 2019. And I assume that, well, I guess one question would be in the last 2 years,
2020 and 2021. Have you engaged the planning commission on any level about this work? I mean, I get the feeling that I'd like to hear from the planning commission in 2021. I'd like to hear that they're still, whatever they thought 3 years ago survived COVID and still makes sense today.
So-
That's kind of what I was.
When we talked about having 12 work sessions, what we did is we tried to get this going again last year in May, and that's when we took it to the planning commission. We went through the whole ordinance, just kind of
Okay.
a reminder, wrap up. And then the idea was like, okay, then we'll initiate SEPA, but we want to do first, we needed to check with legal to make sure we were following all the correct procedures with all the zoning map changes. And then wanted to bring it forward to you as well. So
So
what my plan was, is after, hopefully tonight, if we can kind of conclude the discussion with you guys, is take everything back to the planning commission in January, kind of lay out everything that we've discussed with council. And then hopefully we can initiate the SEPA process if there's agreement. If there's a need, if you want it to come back, we can do that too. But just in terms of next steps, after there's agreement, we would take it through SEPA. Then it would go to a planning commission public hearing, and then with you guys, first and second reading.
So in the work that you did last spring, were there any significant changes between the work that was done 2 years earlier? And did they head in a different direction? Did they?
No, what came up out of those meetings was the addition of the museum. And not really much else. There was discussion that came up about climate change and like, that's not the appropriate, this is not where that would go. So it was really just a refresher. And like I said, the museum idea and very few other minor ideas were discussed.
So barring new input, it's your feeling that planning commission is fully on board with this as we're.
Yeah, the current makeup of the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my concern is that 10 or 15 years ago, whenever it was, there was a huge public discussion and the community was very divided over this. And I don't want to, and it resulted, so if we just do this, we remove all of the chapter with that was developed to mitigate the impact of those large scale super stores. And there's a bunch of stuff in code that would have to be deleted because it would be pointless if we are just going to permit. You would have no need for a regional retail overlay zone. You wouldn't need to do any of the mitigations with the traffic and all of the other stuff that was in that portion of the code. So I'm fine having that discussion, but I think it needs to be a lot bigger than the planning commission and the council. And so it may very well be appropriate, and people aren't building those side stores so much anymore. And so the pressure is different. Retail environment has totally changed. It's probably time to revisit it, but I don't want to do it without a bigger community discussion. And I guess I would like to wrap this up, get it in the code and move on, and then start, as we always do, amending that version again. So if we could just hold this out and stick with what we've got for those supersized stores, then I would feel a lot more comfortable.
And I'll let you guys have that discussion, but I do want to let you know that, so what Nancy's referring to is this regional retail overlay zone. And we did revise those standards about 4 years ago, I want to say, made some updates to it. And I would just say that this overlay, it doesn't matter what the underlying zoning district, but what's required is that you have a 100,000 square feet of business space with one anchor store, at least 50,000 square feet in size, and then smaller supporting stores for the other 50,000. So, I mean, if you changed this, super scale one, it wouldn't necessarily mean we had to eliminate it. It wouldn't get rid of the regional retail. It would just be a separate thing on the side. So you've got the one there, and then you've got the one over here. Now, previously, we didn't really have that many lots that were zoned CH that would be large enough to accommodate for that. But then if you come over here, one of the proposals is to eliminate part of the commercial tourist zone, but in the ordinance itself, we're actually proposing to make this a mixed use zone in some of the areas. So it could be a matter of looking at the commercial highway zone properties and determining if they'd actually fit something 60,000 square foot or in size or not. But these are just things to throw out there to have your discussion. So if you want to you've shared yours, Nancy, if others have something to share, that's great. And I'll answer questions to the best of my ability, and I'll take whatever direction you ultimately give to staff and make those changes.
Maybe it would be helpful just to, if you could just quickly do the definition of retail super scale. Is there a definition?
So it's just basically 60,000 square feet plus, but let me see if there's an actual, there's probably a definition in city code.
Greater. It opens the fish's mouth.
There's not a lot to the definition of retail. Any use which involves a display and sale of retail consumer goods. So with this, it's just about the size, 60,000 square feet or greater.
There's a regional something or other.
Yeah, and that's what Nancy was referring to previously, where you've got to have a minimum of 100,000 square feet with at least 50,000 square feet used by one retailer, your anchor store.
So there's way more than that, though. I mean, there's a whole
Well, there's a whole chapter. on it.
chapter
Yeah.
in the code that pertains to that regional retail overlay zone, which you would lose if you permitted over 60,000 feet outright.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily lose that because going back to the map, let's see. Like coming down to the southern one, if somebody wanted to, tear, and I don't think this is going to happen, but say in 20 years, somebody wanted to like just tear down a whole bunch of stuff in here, it wouldn't matter what the underlying zoning district was. So the 60,000 square feet would be limited to the commercial highway zone. The regional retail, basically, it doesn't matter what the underlying zone is. So that would still be in play as like a separate option.
What's the upper limit on the super scale retail, regional retail? 100, or is there no upper limit?
I don't believe there was an upper limit.
So right now, you could build under 60,000 square feet in any CH zone,
Well,
or under this proposal anyway.
okay. It's like, I could go to the code right now, but let's screen share again.
So, I mean, you have it divided less than 2,000 square feet, 2 to 20, 20 to 60. And they're
Yeah.
all permitted in most of the commercial zones.
Yeah, so when you come here under the under 2,000 square feet, you've got in the commercial neighborhood, commercial highway, central commercial and central commercial 2, and then proposing to add it to the 2 mixed use zones. The medium scale that goes up to between 2,000 and 20,000 square feet is basically the same. The 20 to 60, also the same, except that there's a couple of footnotes. Let's see what those are real quick. Grocery store, okay. Grocery store shall be the only retail uses permitted with more than 20,000 square feet of gross floor area. And that's applicable.
That's only in the
Commercial
in the
neighborhood,
zone.
which is very minimal area that's got that designation. And then with your 60,000, it had only been in your CC and CC2 with a conditional use permit. Kind of like your Fred Meyer was in CC2.
So could you remind me again on the red, the highlighted, the underlined Ps for permitted under the super scale? There's nothing currently permitted? for
That's right. I
CH
highlighted
or
them red
RCMU?
just to bring your attention. So they're underlined because they're being proposed to be added. So right now they're not, well, this one's new. This is the regional center mixed use. So right now, these two right here are the only ones in code at present. The CC and the CC2s only have to have that conditional use permit.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councilmember Wilquist's comment on both counts. One, we want to move this along. Two, I think we really do need to have a bigger conversation about this as we go forward, particularly as we're trying to sort of superimpose this large scale retail on a new zone. You know, these mixed use commercial zones, the RCMU, but possibly even the others. But I guess we'll see where we go.
Council, other comments on this?
My comment, I only have one comment, and that is that it seems to me that from everything I'm reading nationwide is that the superstore and the big malls are dying. I mean, they're really dying. They don't know what to do with it. They literally have thousands of square feet of empty space, and COVID took it even further. I mean, there are malls that have had to shut down now because they just simply, they can't, the people that are in the tenants have either closed up or quit or given up. You know, the rents are too high for what they're generating out of it. So, and I've known for years that that was coming, but COVID kind of pushed it over the edge from what I'm reading. And I think those kinds of retail are going to be something we're not going to see in the future. I think having it codified in some way so that if somebody does come in and want to do it, you have a way to handle it. But I also feel that the future is going to be smaller, more flexible space. Pretty mixed up.
And if I may, I think it's beginning, so I believe that that's one of your concerns about our current regional retail overlay and also doing this. Right, I mean, some of the reading that I've done about a Walmart and a Target, I mean, they're not building quarter million square foot stores. They are building 100,000 with local pickup. I mean, Walmart has a new model out there of about 100,000 square foot. Target has a new model out there that's 75 to 100,000 square feet. You know, so to the point, I think that could either be, that would not necessarily ever be a regional retail because they're no longer looking for those linkages that malls once represented.
So you do need to cover them in code, but in a different way.
And I guess, you know, if we developed, to Mary's point, there are communities all across the nation who are trying to figure out what to do, these albatrosses of empty 200,000 square foot buildings that superstores have just abandoned. And so to just permit them without, I'm just looking for something more for that scale. There is additional traffic impact. There's additional risk for the city. So how is that mitigated? And I guess that's what I'm looking for. But I mean, like I
You're
said,
right. I mean, the planning commission, when they reviewed this, you know, before COVID, it was happening, but it wasn't to the extent where these large stores are just kind of going defunct. But if you want to provide the direction to like, just not include this for now, we can do it. But I would just, to answer your question, just because something's permitted, they would still have to go through the SEPA process. They still have to we'd have a pre-application, we'd tell them all about the traffic impact fees and all the other city requirements that they'd still have to pull permits, but it's just an easier process to get to yes.
If they were permitted only as a conditional use, would that be the level of conversation that you think would be okay, or you just think that they should? Because rather than just not having it on the table whatsoever, especially for this new zone or use, new use, if it was conditional, does that offer a level of conversation that you think
guess-
would be acceptable? I don't even know if that's an option.
I'd have to, how do we know what the conditions are?
So-
Are those developed as conditions, or is that a case by case?
So it's kind of case by case, but I mean, it's certainly an option to have this be a conditional use permit, but there's certain criteria a project has to meet, and it just goes to the planning commission only. They make that decision. And then they assign any conditions. And then there are guidelines about the types of conditions, like what they can impose. And, we can look at that if you want.
The other option might be to raise the 60 when we were talking, it was all 100,000 was the definition of a big superstore. So, that area between 60 and 100, maybe okay. I don't know. And then have another category of over 100 with additional requirements. But
And of course, I'm sitting here laughing because there are people building houses that are 60,000 square feet.
oh my gosh.
Excessive.
So where are we going with this?
I'm not going to be here, so it's not going to be my decision. I'll just throw in my 2 cents. I think you need to leave flexibility in there, and I don't know how you structure it, but I think you need to leave flexibility in there, because I could see somebody coming in and wanting to build a project that might have 60 to 100,000 square feet of mixed-use retail on one floor and have apartments upstairs, or have, something else upstairs. I don't know what that's going to be, but I know that it's changing. I see it. I mean, downtown Bellevue has changed until I can hardly, I feel really old when I go to Bellevue now, because it has changed so much since I started to know Bellevue as a teenager. And now you have all these places with restaurants and everything downstairs and retail. And then upstairs, you've got hotels, or you've got apartment units, or you've got condominiums, or you've got other things. And that mixing keeps it very alive. It really does. I think we've got to keep our minds open. And I don't know how you do that with code. Code's tough, because you've got to have some clarity too for whoever's going to do something.
Well, I mean, to me, I think the focus of this conversation is on those stores that would be 60,000 square foot or greater. To your point, the RC mixed, whatever, the residential commercial mixed use, I think that's what it stands for now, would permit that. Right. I mean, so theoretically, you could come in with 125,000 square foot footprint and go up 3 floors and be good under, so.
For example, is that?
Because all of those are already, I mean, they're new, but if you look on page 33, going from the coffee houses to the small, different retail, all of that you just alluded to, Mary, would be permitted.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposed zone change on Ruby south of Mountain View, that corner down, isn't that also going to be RCMU?
That would be the neighborhood center mixed
And
use.
neighborhood center, okay,
I brought up the
okay.
map for the regional center mixed use, where this is the other interchange, the west interchange. And all of this in the hatch marks is pretty much all commercial tourists. That's gonna, if this zoning ordinance goes into effect, it would change this zoning to that mixed use, which you could then have those different uses that we have in the chart, but yes, does that include 60,000 square foot retail or not? This in pink, that will be remaining as commercial highway, just over here, so south of the transfer station. And then this newly annexed area that's currently just basically like hayfields, that is commercial highway. So we do get inquiries on this parcel actually quite a bit, but it's interesting that different uses don't necessarily want to be next to the transfer station. But then moving on to the other mixed use. Right here, this is Ruby Street. And so this also would be changing from commercial tourist, commercial highway, and then this would be the area for the neighborhood center mixed use. Yeah. And that's a little bit lower scale than the regional center mixed use.
Talking about the retail, one. That's super scale on that. Okay. So that area, as it's depicted, is there any future RCMU there? I don't think so. Is there on that particular,
In this area?
the whole, I mentioned that whole south area? There's no proposed zone down there in RCMU, correct?
Oh, no, not down here.
Right, okay.
But I believe the future land use might be set up to, I think it is set up to allow for that if somebody wants to request that. There are potential uses, you know, kind of waiting. If this gets changed, the night's in, we get calls like, I don't know, every other month, like, can we turn them into apartments? And I can't right now because of the zoning.
If just to move this forward, we change those to Cs instead of Ps, I think I could live with that, but you know, I guess at some point we need to have a
bigger
conversation about what conditions we would want for those large scale, or if you added another category of over 100,000.
Yeah.
I could live with the Ps here and Cs of over 100,000.
Well, it looks like the threshold is 60,000, right? So everything below 60 is P, and if we were to go 60 and above, we're talking C, right? For retail super scale.
Well, as Nancy's. other
Yeah,
alternative is do a 60 to 100, so.
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly. Could be a range.
Because as I recall in those old conversations, it was always 100,000 was the super scale, and 60 is the size of stores we have now.
Oh, yeah, easy.
And you know, that's less of a concern. It's the over 100 that was the concern.
Just for scale, Fred Meyer's 128, right?
Yes, thank you. I was like, I had a list for you guys at the last meeting. We deferred it from, and I didn't bring it into the room, but you're correct. Fred Meyer's about 128.
Yeah, so I would suggest doing the 60 to 100 and 100 with the C. And I think we'd have general support for that.
So
And I think it would be less cumbersome.
make sure everyone's in support, and then to clarify, we add another category, 60 to 100,000 would be permitted in CH and the RCMU. And then over 100 would be
Conditional.
conditional use.
And that would, yeah, so the 60 to 100 would be retail almost super.
And
we can change that name super scale on that one. Maybe that could be the 100,000 one. We'll come up with another name.
Okay,
And everyone's in agreement on that?
I think as close as we're going to be.
I think so.
We're at 6:45. Once
And I
again.
can complete this. Did you have any other comments on any other portions of the non-residential use table?
For on the table, no, I had two.
yeah,
comments.
Okay.
go ahead.
Just, I got a little confused at the beginning of the ordinance because it spoke to, I'm not going to find it in the middle of all this. But we have a resolution to expand multifamily past the CC, and it seemed as if there was
The MFTE,
yeah,
are you talking about that?
Yep. And it seemed as if there was a lot of language at the beginning of the ordinance.
There was reference to the fact that it would be expanding the ability because the CC zone would be increasing. However, that's almost a moot point because tonight you're going to be looking at whether or not to just make the MFT allowable in the CC2 zone.
Yeah, so that was my, well, it's a deal. Because if we're going to do a resolution this evening that expands, and then you come back and the lead of our ordinance is speaking to a CC and the MFTE.
And you know, I don't think that it's in the I have to reread the ordinance. We put it in the PowerPoint that we presented as just a rationale, but
Section 2, I
Okay.
think, under purpose. Maybe I'm reading it incorrectly. And it goes on through there. Then the other conversation, I think the broad conversation that we're not having is one of the issues that we've talked about at council and not come to resolution at all is parking. I mean, so we're just going to go through the change. We're not going to have a conversation about how parking impacts capacity. I mean, I think it's kind of to that broader, you know. okay,
Are you talking just in the CC and CC2 or everywhere?
Go
Everywhere.
through the
Mhm.
thing. Parking has been a conversation.
so parking has been a conversation. We did have a work session, gosh, over a year, year and a half, 2 years ago, before COVID sometime. And we had done a study on that, but I think what we could do is try to wrap that into the housing implementation plan strategies and have that part of that conversation, because this was started before we did the housing action plan.
No, I
And
understand.
it kind of goes towards it, but we need to do a lot more work in the coming year on meeting those strategies, and parking does come into play.
Okay. I mean, I'm good with that to a point, but I guess to me, I mean, we are broadly revising the land development code based on a lot of information from 2018 and 2019. It's 2021. We have not made some of the changes that we had anticipated making. And to your point, we had a study session on parking. It has not been then reflected, nor has it necessarily gone past the planning commission for a broader conversation for recommendation. But we are doing significant changes to our land development code at the same time, all of which then impacts our ability to meet some of our other strategic initiatives. I'm not prepared to fall on my sword on this, but again, I mean, it's been an ongoing conversation, and it is not incorporated, nor is there any reflection of a conversation incorporated into what's in front of us. Right? And we're going to have to go through this. And then if we don't change it now, we're going to go through it again in 6 months, because we will then have a housing action plan, and we're going to reopen the land development code, and we're going to redo the ordinance. And
We will be redoing the ordinance. That's a fact. It would just be nice to get this one in play so we can just move forward with this as the new clean slate. And
Can I
parking be-
raise another
I'm
kind of
sorry.
big
Yeah.
issue? So I'm concerned that by allowing and encouraging residential in our downtown core and our commercial areas, that we dilute the walkability and the density for the commercial uses. And if we had a requirement for retail on the first floor of the apartments, I think that solves the issue. But otherwise, you're trying to walk around downtown doing your errands, and you're walking past a block of apartments to get to your next retail place. And on page 32 of 400, we're allowing duplexes and townhomes in our commercial core. And that is just not an efficient, effective use of prime real estate. And it doesn't create it doesn't add to the commercial energy
Vibrancy.
and vibrancy. And so I would suggest we delete those out of there. But, and also, and again, it's a bigger conversation, but we need to be requiring retail on our first floor, at least in the CC zone. I'm not sure about the CC2.
And parking for the units upstairs. I gotta say, having had an office downtown, I just could have wept because cars lived on in the same parking places day after day after day after day after day. And they were upstairs tenants who then biked or walked up to the university, and it meant I didn't have space in front of my office.
I'm gonna, let's, because we're now 9 minutes before we need to start the next reality. I'll look, I mean, what,
So my item will just take a few minutes and. we
well,
can handle
actually,
most
no,
of it. So,
I'm
yep.
concerned that there's not closure here.
Okay.
Again, and
Perfect.
still.
So- And I would recommend then we continue this discussion at a future study session and.
So I
let's
guess I
have some
want
of
a
those-
sense of council, recognizing that 2 of our council members have Tom Pickerel prints and are going to disappear into the sunset with them. But it is, to the broader comment, I feel like I'm not feeling like we're closing. I'm feeling as if there are underlying conversations or concerns on at least 2 of the council members and perhaps myself about this process. And I need a sense of council on either having staff come back to us with a clearer plan, or I don't know, perhaps working with 3 council members and staff not to do this, but to come back with that plan so that we can potentially articulate the broader conversations that council would like to have. But it feels like we're foundering on both detail and underlying broad concept. Rich?
And I guess, to me, this is kind of the chicken and the egg argument. I think if the conversation's about broad concept and overall intent, we need to have that conversation before we ask staff to do a bunch of work. We're supposed to set that direction, and having them bring something to us and having us react if it's about broad concepts is, to me, backwards.
Well, I think, if I may, the challenge for me has been that we've been having broad conversations for 6 years.
No,
And we're here now.
yeah, no, I understand that, but I guess what I'm saying is, if we're talking about something like, mandating that retail be on the bottom floor of all projects, that's a big conversation. I think we need to have that conversation before we ask them to frame and, start creating something that they don't know how we're going to react
Well,
to it.
or to one of Nancy's comments earlier, with our broader community.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, I didn't
I mean,
ask for that to be brought back. I just think we need to have that conversation as to what extent do we want to have residential in our commercial areas? And if so, how do you make that work?
I think the code will be opened again.
Mhm,
I think there are things that can and should move forward.
mhm.
And I don't think we'll come to a yeah, I won't be here. I have that sweet print, but I think there are opportunities for those conversations and for even the details, still allowing staff to move forward with some of the things that are holding projects up. In the meantime, I think some of the things that are on the table are big conversations.
And, obviously we can come back with any of these conversations. I'll move in whatever direction you want, but some of the big things are changing some of these zoning districts, adding those mixed use zones, increasing the size of the CC zone. There's some things that a lot of conversation did take place with the community. And then there's all these little details that maybe there are more you want to add to, but you just give me your guidance and
You
we'll.
you know what? I want to move forward with this. So if, I don't want the little details to, I mean, they've been in here, some of them for forever, and so I'm okay if we make the amendments we talked about tonight and then move forward and run it through SEPA and then take it up again and start making the list of things we want to have the conversations about and developing those separately. I don't think we have to get it all into here now.
Okay. So the direction from council is to make the corrections that have occurred, roll it up into an ordinance and have it come back.
Where we are.
All right, thank you.
So we have a 4-minute break.
Gonna get a trash bag on fire as my going away.